So I don't know if any of you have anything else that you want to say, or if there are questions from everyone else.
I had something else that I wanted to see if I totally forgot. And I guess we wanted to open it up to question. Did you have anything you wanted to? I wanted to ask you about your trip to Slovenia and when you were, because we talked a little bit about what we were going to talk about it.
There was weird. Some of the things.
In the
Some of the
90s.
things that kind of shook us were. One of the things was patient voices in the of users, of the community of users, and we started to do this, and there was really very few examples around how injection drug users had a voice and had demands and did so. They were only looked at as victims and criminals, one or the other, and we didn't know. We started doing needle exchange. We didn't really know about that. We learned about that from other examples. One example that I saw when in former Yugoslavia was a group called Stigma, which was an organization of users. And I went to their meetings and saw some of their stuff while I was there. And I was like, wow, this blew me away that it was just self-organized users. And Jack said that, and then I rambled off to Switzerland and saw these junkie parks, or needle parks they call them, where the police kind of got everybody, and there's one little spot in the city where you're allowed to use drugs, and people would go in there with just like people laying anywhere, blood, needles, everything, and supporters and helpers cleaning up and stuff like that. And that, to me, that was appalling. I was just like, oh my God, my poor little virgin ears. And that was another thing. And a few years later, I was like, we got to do something, but I don't want it to look like that. You know, where needle exchange was a tool of control, and harm reduction work was a control tool. So those two things, patient voices and needle parks. And then we started connecting with folks that, at the 2000, I think it was Oakland Harm Reduction Conference. People came down from Vancouver, and they told us about how crazy and out of control Vancouver was, because people the area had been kind of compressed, and there was just like injection drug shooting galleries and dens and legal shooting injection facilities, and that was like way before we'd even thought about legal injection facilities, and the people came and told us all about that, and that was really eye-opening for us, those locations. But the key thing, I think, what David said and what Mark and Julia are referring to, was the voice of the users in guiding what we do. And I think that's the thing that's still like the key thing. And I think, just to repeat what David said, I think that's really an exciting thing that we can keep working with that, because that's really been what's pushed NEED along.
Though, just to sort of follow up on that, something I wanted to mention, I think that NEED has been really lucky being in Berkeley, being based in Berkeley, even though our reach is much beyond Berkeley, both because of Berkeley's history as an incubator for radical organizations and radical politics, but also because of the university. And so when it comes to things like research, but also just getting volunteers, the university is a great sort of funnel for that, of like Chipper Young, like a lot of our previous important volunteers, folks, or UC Berkeley or any of the other universities in Alameda County or nearby, a great funnel. But I think that the tension is always like, how do we sort of, as the generation grows older, or as the organization grows older and sort of generations of people passing out, how do we keep that spirit alive? How do we keep that connection to the streets alive if the people coming into the organization don't necessarily have those experiences? Mm-hmm. And there are people in the group now who have drug use experience, but I wouldn't say that's who's predominantly a volunteer in the organization. And I think that something that we have been able to do well is not only maintain enough volunteers to keep the services going, but also do a good job of onboarding people and training people and sort of passing on that spirit of being responsive, even if as an organization we aren't a group of former people who use drugs or people who actively use drugs, or things like that, the way that we might have been as a percentage or something more in the
It
previous
was a
decades.
pretty high percentage.
Yeah, exactly. So just to add on to that.
And I don't know if this is the note we would end on, but I'm just looking. I wrote something up. I've been trying to work on giving more of a definition to harm reduction that's it's sort of inclusive of. I believe that it goes beyond just approaches to drug use or risky sex. I think there's a lot of, and we've touched on a lot of the sort of philosophical stuff about, and I just wanted, I think the social justice movement part of it has been really important, and has informed probably all of us in our adherence to it, and I've also kind of posed the question to random people that are seeking harm reduction services, say at the harm reduction therapy center or whatever, and one of the things you hear is it's the opposite of 12-step. It's the opposite of abstinence only requirements, and it's interesting. There's a tension also between that attitude, but which it really does offer a set of, in terms of people seeking services, but also seeking behavioral change and just self-definition. I think it's served as a contrast from the recovery movement, but also it's also kind of this umbrella that includes anything that is working for you. We're not going to disrupt that. If 12-step works for you, then we embrace that as some making positive change. And the phrase "meeting people where they're at" is one that emerges a lot. And so there was a Facebook conversation between Ro Giuliano and Alan Clear that I saw a couple of years back that was what is going on with Wikipedia? The Wikipedia definition of harm reduction is totally kind of limited and doesn't mention the social justice movement or a drug user fueled movement or and so she wanted to rework that definition in terms of online presence, and so I managed to capture some of those ideas in what I was writing for another project, which is called the Gay Agenda, but that's it's a planner, kind of not unlike the Slingshot Organizer. It's in process right now, but Casper photographed the Hotties of Harm Reduction calendars that were points of distribution, which is Catherine Swanson's needle exchange that is a delivery exchange that was local and unfortunately lost its funding and is no longer active. But you should check out these calendars. They're also things that I want back, but they've got naked pictures of needle exchange workers, so feel free to pass them around. And we do have a little bit of time for comments, questions, whatever.
And cake eating.
Cake eating.
Yeah. And we have
Petting,
T-shirts as
bunny
well.
petting.
I guess it's just interesting to me, even though it's obvious, but still, how stigmatized it is. It is. Because harm reduction is obvious. If there was a car accident, of course you're going to stop the bleeding or whatever. You're going to do what you need to reduce harm.
And you're going to put a seatbelt in the car,
Yeah.
which is the metaphor that we often use.
There you go, right. But it's so interesting how people were blind and I don't know what, just couldn't even think straight because of the stigma or whatever it was.
Well, there's the war on drugs. That's probably lingering over it.
Right.
And there's the interesting confluence that David sort of talked about of that needle exchange was since it was a totally new idea and the people that were doing it in some places weren't connected to the community. They were seen as outsiders and invaders, and
Oh,
it was
yeah.
easy to see needle exchange as something very suspicious and even conspiratorial.
Right.
Because it was also, you know, it was an era where there were HIV and AIDS conspiracy theories that were widely held and still are widely held, and things like that. And needle exchange could easily fit into those kinds of narratives too.
Yeah.
And yet, throughout Berkeley, I think people have always had a good relationship with need. Like whenever I'd be driving the van and people would be like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" Or like, I would describe what I do, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's the blue van. Oh, I know that blue van." So
Yeah.
we've had very few bad experiences in Berkeley.
Compared to our friends in Oakland who had, a terrible time in the 1990s, for instance, getting arrested constantly and things like that.
And we also, I think that there's also a fair number of people that like get hassled or get incarcerated, and it's outside of our radar, or like slightly outside of our radar, where they're still, even though it's legal to carry needles, it's legal to carry clean needles, it's legal to carry dirty needles in any quantity as long as they're containerized. Now, but I think that people are doing jail time and getting a lot, and I hear about it every now and then, and it's sort of doesn't happen to us. It happens to our participants outside of the realm of or outside of like sight. So there's still work to do, and it's not we don't do police outreach very much. It's kind of that's a challenge.
Do you think one of the challenges to all of this area is, because I think about it a lot, is the basic tenets of capitalism? Like if drug use were like, okay, it's funded, like we don't even have public restrooms like that are just accessible, and I think some of us have known about going to the bathroom. So, but if it was something like, okay, you need somebody will be down here in 3.5 minutes, and because when someone's, a regular user, it's oxygen, water, substance. It's like the that's significant. And I think that, if things, and the word was out, or there was a connection. I'm not going to talk about an organized, but organizational, but, that there wasn't like something cut with something really bad going around or something like that. That's what I'm saying. The drug use would just be like, okay, you washed your socks and your underwear, and that's the way it goes. And I think that's, I think it's, I'm going to say this, I think it's appalling that people shouldn't be able to choose what substance they want to put in their own bodies and share with their friends. It's just like, who's deciding for whom, and you're supposed to pee in a jar for them? I mean, years later, something is going to be like, what would they do? I mean, it's just like outrageous. So, to round edges and mitigate some of the effects of this craziness, you appreciate it very, very, very much. And I think it's really important that we don't forget that, because it hurts people physically, and the jail system is like literally popping at the seams. So, I mean, it isn't just how do we philosophically and what should we, it's like happening, it's outrageous. And, to hear, good stuff that people are doing to help each other is always really positive.
Well
Thank you.
put.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's those are really important points. And I find myself in conversations with people in the public health world about, or avoiding conversations with people in the public health world about tobacco, because like tobacco is one of those, like, we fought the war against the big tobacco companies, and so now we make laws about, and law after law after law, and prevent, ban it and
And tax
tax it and all the and have tobacco free everywhere. And it's, you know, it's kind of nice not to have secondhand smoke like right in your face everywhere you go, because I do remember that. But it feels like it's, you know, it's very much like being a harm reductionist. You just like the agency, the taking away of agency and the sort of like, it feels like they're going too far.
Yeah, though it's like to go. I think that there's a lot in what you said, and like a lot of different ways you could take it. Because some people, there's been the critique of needle exchange that it's like just a new way to get people under control, and you're like hooking them into the system, and it's like a ploy to get people hooked back in. You know, it's to make them. It's essentially not to fix the problem. It's just to bandage people up enough that they can be fed back into the machine, right? So their drug use isn't too much of a problem for them to work and to do everything else that they're supposed to do to be a good capitalist citizen. I don't think that's what we do, but I think there is the potential for that. But I think the deeper, almost the deeper point is that because the substances that people have available to them are available on a market, whether it's a legal market like tobacco or an illicit market like opioids, they're already having a lot of their agency removed. So it's like, yeah, we should let people buy their cigarettes, but the cigarettes they're getting sold are being sold to them by like awful corporations that are filling them with all kinds of terrible chemicals and stuff. And similarly, you know, in the opiate world, like people might want to go out and buy heroin, and like that's great. I have no problem if you want to go out and buy heroin. But what we're seeing now is people think they're buying heroin, and because of the DEA cracking down and because of the increases in demand for the drugs, the cartels and stuff that, you know, actually run the distribution are cutting it with fentanyl and finding all kinds of even like animal tranquilizers that they can put into the supply to make the stuff stronger. And so then people like don't even know what they're buying, right? So there are all these layers to how, like, just the presence of a market mechanism, and then add to the fact that all the stuff that we do is free, is always going to be free, couldn't work if it wasn't free, and that we're constantly scrounging to get a few pennies here and there to do this super cheap service so that we don't have to charge people for it. Like, there are all kinds of challenges that like needle exchange is kind of the tip of the spear to starting to provide a free service. But if you go further, it's like, well, if we really want to reduce the harm, we have to get the market out of drug use, because otherwise people are always going to be buying products that they don't have a lot of control over, and that are going to be carrying all kinds of unintended consequences as a result. So I think that's it's a huge problem.
Thank you. And I want to throw out one more thing.
Yeah.
I don't hear people talking about it, but you know, there was a time back when in the movies, like in Frank Sinatra days and all that, oh, you're going to stay home? Well, if you want to go to sleep, there's something, take that. And if you want to, you know, wake up, there's, you know, something, take that. And if you don't know what you want to do, take one of each. Yeah. And like,
all those little yellow pills.
Yeah. But you know, and now there's in TV, the major, you know, TV celebrities in the not sitcoms, I don't know, the weekly shows, in the drinking, they drink when they feel happy, they drink when they go out, they drink when they're sad and when there's a tragedy. They're constantly, the whole thing is go to a bar or have wine at home, or, you know, and it's like a proliferation of alcohol. And it's not just you see a scene once in a while. And that's really distressing to me. I'd rather see people fixing with clean needles. And I advocate for that myself. I don't want someone with the legal system to get, you know, messed up. But aside from that, I would say stay high, but not stay drunk.
Well, that's the other market piece, right? It's like tobacco and alcohol are the really dangerous drugs, and the reason that they're legal is because they've got powerful industries that took hold early enough that they could, you know, keep the law off their back. So yeah, I think that's a great point too.
That sounds like another discussion group that I'd love to be part of. Like, and I think, yeah, it's really been a treat to come and speak here, and thank you guys for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of your hard work.
Guys.
harm reduction, it's ironic that the drugs that are legal are actually more harmful in many ways.
Well, and there's actually, like, now there are people doing research. Like, if you look, the states that have more, less restrictive marijuana laws, so places that have medical marijuana and that have legal marijuana also tend to have lower rates of opioid abuse and opioid overdose because they're substitute drugs, right? Like, maybe, you know, if we let people use not only smoke weed more, but use really good quality medical marijuana products, then they won't need these highly addictive, very dangerous opioid pills anymore. Or they won't want to use them anymore. They'll prefer to use the THC. So I think that there's all. I mean, yeah, it's and the opioid thing is a huge pharmaceutical. I mean, the CDC, the FDA. Just last year approved like a new super like high concentration hydrocodone pill. Like we still don't learn this lesson, even though their own advisory board was like, we don't need this drug, but it's a moneymaker, and so it's like we haven't learned.
Patented.
Yeah, we haven't learned the lesson at all.
Sure.
So
Well, what we are seeing, right, with coming out of Afghanistan, that we're not, Bayer doesn't have access to the opium fields in the same way. And so we're seeing in Western medicine this big push against opioid use. And now the change in the pharmacy prescriptions and the higher use of heroin and the more need for needle exchange is a direct relationship to pulling out of Afghanistan and Iraq. And I think that people don't make those connections in terms of social justice and how it really affects medicine, you know, and if you're an IV drug user, you know, like we're talking about the best of respect in the community, but if you go into the Western medical system, you're not going to get the liver transplant, you're not going to, you know, you're going to be criminalized for your behavior. And so I think it's also real important to talk about the treasure of respect that you've always provided to the community, because that is not the norm. And we're seeing more heroin use with this pullback from Afghanistan, and I think it's real important to make those connections about war, militarism, and drugs.
well, and I think the other connection, because actually most of the U.S.'s heroin comes from Mexico and Central America as well, and it's like the same thing. Like we start a drug war in Mexico, the cartels ratchet up their violence, they start changing their distribution patterns. We get more dangerous heroin coming into the U.S. because it's cut with different things. I mean, it's all over the world, right? That those consequences, you know, spraying the fields overseas, it always ends up back here one way or another. And it's the most vulnerable people who have no control over the drugs that they're forced to buy who end up bearing the burden of that, you know.
Can I ask you something, please? Was I reading into what you were saying correctly? The military gives, and the one thing I personally think that's great, unfortunately it's in a system that gives with one hand and slaps the hand with the other, gives hard drugs to the soldiers at some point.
Oh yeah, every point.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know how
that's-
you're going on combat because you get your speed. Everyone's on speed. I mean,
I think that's great, personally. I don't care, everyone can argue.
it helps you to shoot people. Pharmaceutical speed is great. It really helps you to
But
shoot
we
people.
could do they could do something else. They were pointed to something else.
I'm just being real.
Okay, okay, but
That's the military. You know, I'm
That's
military.
the-
I mean,
yeah,
Focused, yeah.
yeah. So the military is really an asset to people who want to do drugs. Is that
No, what I'm saying is that because of the war in Afghanistan, a lot of our soldiers were guarding poppy fields for Bayer. And that's a big push to opioid use and getting everyone on opioids. I'm in my 60s. Every time I went into the doctor's office until 2 or 3 years ago, I was given a bottle of Vicodin.
Yeah.
Because I'm old and I definitely need it. And that
I get offered pills all the
we
time.
had
for
we had a
nothing.
10-year, you know, during the time of the wars, we really had a big push around opioids, and I think it's important to look at that. And now that we've withdrawn from that and we don't have that same protection, now we have a whole new reality around pain meds and how you get your pain meds. And
Well, and there's also been a crackdown in
Yeah.
response to this, you know, the high visibility epidemic of pain medication, prescription pain medication, and so the crackdown you've seen. Okay, there's, you know, like you go to the pharmacist's
no refills. That's a good
Okay,
example.
the pharmacist website is like, you know, like the pharmacists are, you know, gatekeepers that are really being addressed by drug partners for Drug Free America and all this stuff. And so like there's been this transition back into heroin because people can't, you know, the prescription opioids cost more. They can't get them from the doctors or pharmacists that they usually can get, and that's kind of the story. You see also like Appalachia, East Coast, and Midwest and stuff like that. Probably here too, but I'm thinking of like national figures, and it's, you know.
I got a lot of
So
family
it's-
members in Ohio.
Uh-huh.
Done obviously, and they're doing heroin now because they can't get
A lot of sweats.
family members.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Yeah, I have a lot of relatives in Ohio in particular.
Yeah,
Serious.
yeah, and I hadn't put together about Afghanistan. So
Oh my God,
That's
yeah. I
really-
mean, you
that's-
talk to
thank
so
you
many
for bringing that
soldiers,
up.
and what they were doing was guarding bear, poppy fields.
Mm-hmm.
They're, I mean, you know, this, it's horrible.
But beer is, no, I know, I'm just speaking like a, you know, from a naive viewpoint, which sometimes I go, it's all the same time, because I live right down the street from beer, like a couple of blocks. And they're private industry. So the taxpayers are not only supporting the use of, I know they're using it for killing, they could be drawing or dancing, I don't care, hypothetically, I'm gonna say that, or tearing down walls and building them up, but anyway, they're also like, private, so the taxpayers are supporting, and you see it with
It's
Chevron.
capitalism. It's just pure capitalism,
Capitalism, and
and
you
people
see it
don't
with
understand
Chevron.
the nature of capitalism and war. And I think when you're a soldier, you start to see those things. And
yeah,
How it's supporting private industry but not supporting the well-being of beings.
And also that it wasn't until we were pulling out that we decided we're going to deal with our pain problems. That it was perfectly fine for what was happening.
Right.
And to continue
Right.
with that until
yeah. No,
we
you really
cut
just
off
made
the
that click for
supply.
me. I mean, I remember when Taliban was like, oh no more heroin is leaving, or no more poppies are leaving the
Who
country. Or
said
something. The Taliban was like
Oh.
banned. I mean, that didn't last very long, probably because of the like international pharmaceutical companies that have their big like investments there. But I don't have a great understanding for that piece of it. But yeah, I can see how that it lines up historically. And yeah.
Plus, you have so many military people coming back wounded that are addicted.
Yeah, we
you know, I mean,
see
there's
about
just so
that.
many
You
of
know,
us.
we
that
see
are-
like so many generations of vets that
Yeah.
like
So-
come and like.
But you know, we have the best pharmaceuticals, and most of us get addicted in combat. I mean, I have a lot of friends of mine that they stayed in so they could get the drugs. You know.
I think this is a whole, you know,
Hey,
I
Julia,
think it's
you can have a
testing
shirt
and
if you want
very,
one.
very,
Oh
very
yeah,
good.
we have knee shirts too.
But
Right, I know that.
I
but
think
these
whether
are not.
it's set, whether it's actually
Nice.
on the surface or known about and, you know, anyway, but not talked about, it's a conversation. I'm an advocate for a world where people use what they want and have that choice and it's
Is this on still?
I'm also against any kind of medication at all, that's what it is. If anybody has any issue, and they don't give them something that makes them
So much.
feel, oh yeah.
That was really